what you need to know about cannabis real estate, sort of from Boston as a specific example, but what happens in Boston really talks about what's happening in cannabis real estate as a whole. Like I said, we get a lot of questions from financial institutions about cannabis real estate. So we wanted to give you insight, from the ground. So Meaka, do you want to introduce yourself? And then Jeff, you can introduce yourself, and I'm happy to be the person who advances slides. Just let me know when.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Meaka Brown. I work at Green Check, and I am a Cannabis Banking Compliance Specialist. I'm also a cannabis educator and an herbalist, so I spend a lot of time working with the actual plant. And today we have Jeff Similien joining us. Jeff has a very impressive resume. He's the entrepreneur and founder and CEO of LowKey Dispensary here in Boston. He's also got LowKey Cultivation and Boston Trust Realty Group commercial real estate company. He's a founding member of the community empowerment group Kings Amongst Kings. Jeff has focused on three things throughout his professional career: commercial and residential real estate, cannabis equity, and elevating the communities he's a part of by providing opportunities, revenue, and attention to underrepresented individuals. So, Jeff, you wanna chime in here? How you doing today, Jeff? So, the reason we're doing this hot topic today, Jeff and Paul and I were having a discussion about cannabis banking and real estate, and we noticed some pretty common issues and just things that came up in Boston around cannabis banking and real estate. So we wanted to put this together for you guys today as a webinar, just to give you some of the basics. We won't be able to get to everything in a half an hour, but just some of the hot topics. So, we wanted to focus on the needs that are associated with real estate for cannabis related businesses. And so, these needs, if folks in the cannabis industry could get these needs met, they would be a lot more successful in the industry. They'd be able to open their businesses a lot faster, and have a very healthy cannabis banking relationship. So Paul, do you want to advance? Oh, no, you don't need to advance. Sorry. Forgive me, I'm a little delayed over here. So Jeff, let's discuss municipal requirements and zoning. What are your thoughts on that and in the cannabis banking, cannabis cannabis real estate space?
First of all, once again, thank you all for being here. Thank you all for this opportunity, Meaka and Paul. I'm glad to be here to share some of my experience, not only as a commercial real estate broker, but also as a business owner in the cannabis industry for the past, I could say about 4 years now, that I've been in this since at least 2018, maybe a little longer. As a broker, just helping out some clients and eventually jumping in myself. This is when it comes down to the requirements and the zoning, it's something that I would say it's very, very confusing for anybody and everybody who are, whether you in business or whether you was in cannabis or you in any other business. This is something that, that I learned in business is to understand how to leverage resources and leverage people who are expert and experienced in their field. So in that matter, when it comes to understanding zoning, every neighborhood has a ISD inspectional services in an office that you could go into to actually speak to somebody or get an attorney or zoning attorney. So the first thing that I would say is possibly reach out to a zoning attorney to actually, develop that relationship and necessarily to start having, for you personally, to have an understanding of what is required. It's something that's very confusing. Not everybody has the answers. So you have to do a lot of conversation. You have to have a lot of conversation with a lot of different people to even understand what it's going to take to get through that process. So my best advice for me, like I said, as a commercial broker and as a business owner, those are the things that I had to do to understand this process. Everybody on every level weren't quite familiar with every details, because there's so many moving pieces that goes into getting a location zone for cannabis. So it is best to, as an individual, to carry and have those conversations with the right individual, so you could so you could have a better understanding and better knowledge of what it takes.
So you spoke a little bit about zoning. Let's talk about municipal requirements. For instance, in Boston, Boston has completely different requirements for cannabis businesses than, say, the town of Brookline, which borders it. So many people just think about the state regulations, right? But folks don't necessarily think about the municipal requirements. And so let's say I want to open a cannabis business and I found one location in, say, Haverhill, Massachusetts, but I've also found one in Brookline. There's going to be differences in terms of building code at the municipal level. Can you talk a little bit about that, Jeff?
Yes, absolutely. And again, going back to having those resources and having a team. And what I mean a team is those resources, people that you could reach out to and have these conversations and just ask questions. And again, like you just mentioned, Boston is totally different. They put a Boston Cannabis Board in place to help out with the process, right? And then you have inspectional services, that deals with the building. Then you have zoning that deals with the area, of the building, whether it's zoned residential or commercial or mixed use. So again, it's so many different entities that you need to deal with, that you have to deal with. And again, like, I can't say it's this system is set up against cannabis businesses, because it's the same requirement for developments and in just almost any business. So from my experience, looking at it from going through it and doing other businesses in the city of Austin, realizing again it is just a process that you have to go through. And again, where that's the city of Austin, where a smaller town may not have such a brutal process, just because they learned from other neighborhoods, or not to have certain system, or because they're in the development stage, they are more willing and more open to open up new businesses. So it all depends on the neighborhoods and the community. So again, it's just having a conversation with the proper individuals that runs these departments, to understand what is required.
All right. So another hot topic that has to do with the location, ownership versus leasing. So, there are some people who I actually met someone the other day who had an existing business. They had a tanning salon in Boston. And so they leveraged that property that they owned, and kept the business running as a tanning salon, but notified the commission of their intent to turn that tanning salon into a cannabis business. So they were lucky enough to leverage something that they already owned, and not really have to go through that brutal licensing process where they were shelling lots of cash out. So that's an example of someone who owned an existing building. But then there's the leasing aspect. Can you talk a little bit about the issues that arise from that? Because, a lot of folks I hear, they go and they lease the space because the space is required prior to receiving a license, and they run out of money before they even get their license because they've been paying rent monthly. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. I mean, that's for instance, what you just said, it's the beauty of owning, right? When you own it, what you could do with it, you have the freedom to do so many different things with it, right? So typically, um, for anybody just a random person who's planning on starting in the cannabis industry, like you said, they need a location, right? So that location, typically, if you're going to need a location, it needs to be vacant, right? So once you find a vacant location, if it's vacant, whoever owns that building doesn't want it to be vacant, so they bought it as an investment, so it need to be producing money for them. So if it's going to be sitting there for a year or however long that it takes you, as a lease, as a potential tenant, to lease up the space, you need a person to hold it for you. Then you have to compensate them for that, right? So that's the the negative aspect of leasing versus if you owned it. Again, you could put anything in there. You could have another business in there, and with the intention, whenever it is that you get your approval, you are shutting down that business or you are removing that business, and then you are moving forward with your plans. So when once you have ownership, these are the things that you're at liberty to do because you have that flexibility. You have that option. Um, so those are the things that whenever dealing with cannabis clients, that's what I usually push, is to say, look, rather than looking to find that empty space, how about acquiring a building that may have multiple tenants, right? And then there might be an expiring lease, so you could acquire that building, and once that expired lease runs out and then you get your approval, then you could get the person out, but you're not necessarily losing out of money because the building is cash flowing. So there's a lot of different ways of negotiating, right? As This negotiating to acquire a building. Again, so you could have ownership, so you could have that flexibility whenever something happens, like Stacy mentioned earlier. If, for instance, you never know, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, something happens and it becomes businesses becomes illegal, and that or whatever it is, or it has to be all medical, then you could possibly sell it to a business, I mean to another entity, and as of you could sell the business and retain that long-term lease and retain that building for continuous cash flow. So again, having that ownership long term is way more beneficial just than leasing, in my perspective, and also in reality because of the options that you have once you have ownership.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the tricks, though, that people do with leasing? For instance, some people will will attempt to lease a space, but they will cut in the owner of the building, give them ownership. Um, let's also talk briefly about, some of the issues around leasing with regard to, oh, I don't know. Hmm. Uh, well, let's first talk about the ownership portion. I've heard a lot of folks discuss um, that they've offered ownership for their lease. Have you experienced a lot of that?
Absolutely. I mean, again, it's all about the relationship that you have with the owners. If you happen to know the person that owns the building, that you could say, hey, you know, um, if you're currently receiving, I don't know, 3,000 a month, this building, I mean, this business is projected to make me this, whatever amount that you have, and then you could say, hey, I could pay you, 4,000 a month plus, an additional percentage on the business, or on my net on my gross income, on my
Hmm.
net profit. So again, there's so many different ways, like I said, of negotiating and getting to the table and having these conversations. So my advice, to everybody is just, trying to find a way to have these conversations, to be open to have conversation and negotiate every different point on and during your process, because everything is negotiable if you're able to sit down and create a strategy to have this conversation and making it happen. Like I said, having that ownership, of the building, or having control of it somehow, it definitely gives you a better advantage. Where, for instance, if you don't have money and you may not have, I mean, you obviously you don't have the money, and then the owner, they may not have, 1.2 million or whatever it's going to cost to renovate the building. But if there's value within the building because, you giving them ownership of the building, I mean, of the business, so now he could leverage the building with a bank, and use the equity to get funding to do the renovations, or to use whatever funding that you need. So again, having that ownership and being in that lane is way more advantageous than just leasing.
So there's one other thing I wanted to discuss with leasing. Oh, I'm sorry, Paul, you went forward. Not every commercial space that you see that's, of it that says available lease now, will you be able to lease? Can you talk a little bit about the requirements that folks have when
Um,
when leasing a space?
what do you mean not available?
Well, I was told you can't have uh the building has to be paid for. There can't
Oh,
be a mortgage on the building, right?
oh yes,
When
correct.
working in cannabis?
Oh yes, absolutely, absolutely. Yes, I understand what you mean. Again, given the fact that cannabis is a illegal control substance, and most bank and it's federally regulated. Most banks are federally regulated. Um, so one of the biggest risk is that if there is a mortgage, by a bank, that's federally regulated, and for whatever reason we get to a point where the feds could want to call back that mortgage, and then and that put that owner and that put your business at risk. So preferably you want to deal with somebody, or I mean, if there is a bank, the bank is not federally regulated, it's a credit union that has that note on the building. Again, given the fact that there is that at risk, there's that huge risk, huge possibility.
Okay. Next slide, Paul. So, essentially, you talked about leveraging your network, and when you were talking about zoning, you may need a zoning attorney. What are some of the other relationships and folks you need in your network in order um, to purchase real estate or lease in the cannabis space? Who
Yes,
do you
that's
need
a
on
great
your
question.
team?
I'm sorry.
Who do you need on your team?
Oh, yes, that's a great question. I mean, the first two crucial components that you need are attorneys. You need a business attorney that understands how to, obviously the regulations of the CCC, because it's a lot of rules and laws that you need to understand. So you definitely need a business attorney that understand how to set up LLCs, or whether it's corporation, depending on how many people you have involved on your in your business. So how to properly set up that entity. So you definitely need a business attorney, operating agreement, contracts. And then the second thing is a zoning attorney that knows how to navigate um, the system, that knows how to navigate, the municipalities, whatever town, city that you in. And that zoning attorney should also have relationships, or if you don't have a relationship with a an architect, so to help you with an architect, just because you're going to need floor plans and designs and things like that. And I would just also say that all these individuals doesn't necessarily need cannabis experience. The biggest issue is just whether that their firm allows them to take on cannabis and cannabis clients. But at the end of the day, cannabis is just a regulated business. It's just very regulated. That's about it. And there's rules and laws that they just had those attorneys could read and understand those terminologies and be able to translate over to, to any individual. So, those are the first tools, a business attorney, zoning attorney, and definitely a CPA accountant, because, you are handling money, other people's money. So you don't want to do any commingling, or you don't want to get involved, or, not paying your debts, or setting up everything, the right way legally. So things could be done correctly. So you definitely want to have an accountant and, a banker as well. We want to have a great relationship with your banker, whoever it is that you are banking with, and insurance, to insure your business, to insure your assets. So you definitely want to have access to insurance brokers, and as I mentioned, architect earlier, and definitely architect. And most of these resources, most of these professions, they work on a retainer, or they work on commission. So they may look fancy, or may sound like, they cost a lot of money, but most of these resources are typically based on retainers. So pretty much could afford them at some point, as you get this thing going. Yeah, those are the resources that I would say.
Meaka, did we lose you?
Oh, sorry, I was muted.
Oh, it's okay. Happens to everybody.
I was talking away. So Jeff, where did you find these resources? We talked a lot about how you leveraged your existing real estate network, but how did you find folks, who were willing to work with you in cannabis? Did any of the folks that you had worked with previous, did they cross over into working with you into cannabis, or did you have to go find new folks? Did you have to go find a new network?
So speaking from experience, I was under the impression that I needed, individuals with cannabis experience, and some of those resources that I pursue, or I engage with, I realized weren't weren't expert. They were just individuals who read the laws, or who jump into it a year or 2 year prior to me, or had just a few years, you know, just been in it for a few years, but they weren't necessarily experts, so they didn't know it all. So what I realized is just that, like I said earlier, the cannabis business is just like any other business. As long as you understand the laws and the regulations, that you could pretty much operate within those guidelines. So I did cross over with some individuals. Then I did get some other individuals that I thought that cannabis experts, but at some point I reverted back to some of the people that I had experience with. But a lot of most of the individuals that I have relationships were all from networking. I'm a huge networker. I attend a lot of different events. Because again, this is the best way to shake hands and meet individuals that you never know you're gonna meet. And once you meet somebody, that they typically connect you with another 2 to 3 people. So in one night you meet 20 people, you really just met really 60 to 80 people. So it just multiplies in a compound. So I just understand that. So I typically attend, go to a lot of networking events, get people's business cards and follow up with them and stay in touch with them.
Okay. Paul, next slide, please. So cash flow and banking requirements. So this is tricky because when you are embarking on a business in the cannabis industry, the licensing process, I have yet to meet anyone who had an amazing licensing experience. And most of the folks that are starting out in this industry, they think they can get started with, 100K, or they can pull resources from their family, that sort of thing. But the licensing process tends to wipe people out so quickly. Can you speak about some of the clever ways you've come up with for paying for expenses while waiting for a license?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the first ways, as you had mentioned, the person that owned that, what it was,
Oh,
scanning
the tanning
store.
facility?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
having an existing business there that's cash flowing, that you don't have to, necessarily come out of pocket. That's one way. If same as that's one way of somebody being in that position, right? That's one way. And again, targeting businesses, targeting real estate where there are existing tenants there, but that may be a tenant at will, that may be an expiring lease in a year or two, that you could offer the landlord, you know, way more than a little bit more than what they're going to be getting for you to take that space on. You know what I mean? So those are few ways of doing that. And also just, flat out just, offering equity in your company, 3%, 2%, 5%. I don't think, anything for 5% should be during that process, should be anything no more than 5%. And or possibly a lease percentage as well. If you don't want to give up ownership of your building, of your business, you could give them, a lease percentage, revenue percentage. I mean, so those are a few ways that you could, negotiate with the landlord, or property owner.
Okay. Wow, I had never heard about the revenue percentage, but that's a good way without giving up ownership.
Yeah,
Um,
if you say, look, I could pay you $2,000, and then if I make $1 million a year, I'll give you 2% of it. Whether it's, you want to do it after taxes, you could negotiate
yeah,
those ways. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, you definitely want to do it after taxes because 280 is
indeed.
coming one way or another. So, okay. Can we talk a little bit about the cost of loans in cannabis versus traditional um, real commercial real estate market?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, those are something that you just have to, um, make peace within yourself. That, look, you got to pay these high taxes, and that you have to pay these high interest rate, given the fact that there's not too many institutions in this industry. So that makes it for you to really be careful and be strategic on how you plan and execute your business, given the fact that everything costs, right? So everything is a high cost. So you just have to be strategic on who comes in. So for instance, if you are going to negotiate with the landlord, that give them equity of the business. It's not just say, I'll give you equity of the business, but what else can they bring to the business as well? Can they pay for, if you say, I'll give you equity for the business, but can you give me a vanilla box? Can you, leverage your building and borrow, a few $1,000s to renovate this space for me? You know what I mean? So I don't have to borrow a lot of money to come in and not only operate the business, but also renovate this space, right? So how can we negotiate? How can you, same thing if whoever is your lender, right? To say, okay, if you're going to borrow $1 million at 12%, but can you also give me a line of credit, for 7%? So if you run into some issues, that you still have, somehow some way, access to some capital. So it's just really finding different ways and negotiating different terms for yourself as well. So it's a win-win on both sides.
Yeah, I've heard some really crazy horror stories. I've heard about people, finding a lease and paying for it, and then finding out that the owner had been leasing to several businesses, several cannabis businesses, and the owner was just going to wait and see, which business actually got a license. So there's a lot of um, tactics
Yeah.
that are happening on both sides. Some that are harmful to folks in the cannabis industry, but it's a dog eat dog world out there
Yeah,
for.
that's what I was gonna say. It's a dog race, and at the end of the day, this is why I emphasize on having a relationship, and not necessarily just somebody negotiating for you, right? Or if somebody's negotiating for you, it's it's people that are on retainer that are at your best interest, right? So this is something that, because it's high level, you can't cut corners. You know what I mean? And at the end of the day, cutting corners is going to cost you double of what you were going to pay. And I could say for me, I lost a location um, because I knew it was a condo, and I should have. I know afterwards I realized, I'm like, yeah, Jeff, you messed up here because you didn't go in and speak to the other to all the condo owners. You only took the word of the person that said they will sell you their unit, and you didn't take it upon yourself to go introduce yourself to the other owners. And then all the other owners, what they decided to do is just say like, oh, I feel disrespected, this guy didn't come and talk to me. They just amended the condo docs and say they don't want cannabis in the building. So it just took me out. So all the money, everything that I spent, that I started, I lost out. So I had to reflect and say, wow, I didn't do that, so it's on me. And just walked away from it.
Mhm.
So these are the lessons learned that, at the end of the day, I'm speaking from a lot of personal experience, is that you want to just make sure that there's a relationship and there is a understanding with whoever it is that you are doing business with, because of these things, because of everything that could happen. You know what I mean? And it's a lot of money. People get tempted. People get influenced. So um, those things happen. So you really just have to make sure that you dot your I's and you cross all your T's.
So due diligence. Due diligence
Absolutely.
is absolutely key, specifically in working in the real estate aspect of your cannabis business. Well, Jeff,
Absolutely.
thank you so much. Um, we don't have any more slides, right, Paul?
Nope. But I do want to say, again, thank you so much, Jeff, for your time in sharing your experiences. And, three things really leapt out to me. And, as folks from financial institutions, hopefully this slice of, just Jeff's experience in Boston can help contextualize some of the things that Stacy was talking about. For instance, she was saying you need to understand that these ownership structures in cannabis businesses can be quite complex. Jeff shared some very real world, just necessity examples, in order to get access to a building, or in order to, purchase a building, you have to be able to maybe cede some ownership control to some other folks. And maybe you're not necessarily really part of the business, but that's the part of getting the location. So those complex ownership structures are not necessarily just because people are trying to obfuscate, the business that's going on, but you have to do a lot of things in cannabis that you don't necessarily have to do otherwise. Also, one of the things that Jeff was talking about is networking. Meaka and I were talking about this the other day. When you get into any industry, you want to know the guy, right? The non-gender specific guy. But if it's, I need to know how to lease, okay, I know a guy. Or I need to get a loan. Okay, I know a guy. But how do you get the guy? How do you get that name? And like Jeff said, going out to networking events and working with the folks that he currently works with and finding out if any of them are willing to work in cannabis. For financial institutions, Stacy was giving you those kind of suggestions, figure out who were those centers of influence, who's working in cannabis. One of the great ways to get access to cannabis businesses as members or customers is find out who the lawyers are, find out who the accountants are, those architects, the folks that Jeff mentioned. Those folks are going to be able to introduce you to cannabis businesses. And what's great about that is that if they're still working with them and make recommendations, it means, these are trustworthy people that pay their bills. It is a great way to get quality CRBs by understanding, who are the players in that space that don't touch cannabis directly. And then finally, that need for lending. So much of what Jeff has to deal with is find ways to compensate for the fact that it's very difficult to get traditional loans from financial institutions. So think about it as you're thinking about what are the needs in your community. Lending just for real estate for cannabis is a really huge, huge, huge requirement. So Jeff, just one last thing that I wanted to ask before, we wrap things up today. And again, thank you everybody for sticking around. Really appreciate it. So Jeff, this is one of those kind of rare opportunities where, you have, 100 bankers that are here, they're listening to you, they're from credit unions, banks, there's some regulators. What is it that you wish, that you can literally tell directly to bankers right now? What's the one thing you wish that they knew? Is there a piece of advice? Is there, something you want them to know about cannabis? What's one thing that you'd like to say directly to some of the banking folks?
This is a fun, very hard working business and industry to be in. I haven't visited any dispensary, cultivation where I've seen any sad or unhappy employees. Everybody that's in that industry loves it, loves to go to work, loves to be there on time. And there's so many people that are looking to get into this industry, and they're just looking for opportunity. And the opportunity exists just like any other industry, just like any other business. But once you get in there, there's a lot of different politics, but the regulations is just the regulations that are really making this industry difficult, because the revenues there. Businesses are making a lot of money. I've a lot of small locations are making over $1 million a month. Um, you know, but the toughest thing is improvements, is them having enough money to provide, just improve the business, just to scale the business, because again there's not a lot of funding, or some people when they came in, it cost them so much, they overpromise the investors so much money, so they don't have enough revenue to reinvest into the business. And then there's not opportunity for loans, there's not opportunity for line of credit, to allow them to renovate the store, upgrade their machines, upgrade, systems, or do other things, like most businesses are able to do. Because again, there's, it's not opportunity for loans, and, high taxes. So, given the chance, given the opportunity for, bankers, for, financial institutions to go into this industry to actually help businesses, with their needs, it will be, great opportunity for all business owners that are looking to go into this industry and provide job opportunities. Because again, the state wants it, communities wants it, but again, to get it done, with the laws, it's challenging. It's a lot of red tape. It's a lot of, potholes, a lot of objections, a lot of situations that prevents people from doing things just like if it was any other business that they would want to open, with a very less profit margin on being successful. So if there was any ways for, I think financial institutions should just really, give businesses the opportunity to present, or to present, to actually view their business plans, visit their projections, and actually visit some of their locations before making the decisions. I think you go to a place like Uxbridge, where there's this location, this dispensary there. She's super successful. Small town, making again over $1 million a month at that location, right? So there is opportunities in small communities and huge communities. So again, it's just having access to it. People want it. There is a market for it. There's a huge demand for it, and it's just it's there's so many there's a high ceiling for cannabis. There's so many opportunities that's not even on the market yet. For me personally, going out to Vegas, going out to LA, Canada, like these are basically the future. Like when you go there, when it comes to cannabis, it's like it's a world beyond, it's wild imagination. I was just in Vegas, and what they doing, and the brands, the products that's out there and in Massachusetts doesn't even have yet. So it just tells you the projections that we are expecting. I believe we made $1 billion. Massachusetts market made $1 billion in less than 2 years, and I think it took Oregon 6 years to make that. So it just tells you where this market is going, where this industry is going. So yeah, I just hope a lot of institution would really at least take it a case by case and evaluate different businesses to go into, and not necessarily be scared of it just because they hear that the feds is not it's not federally legal. So that would be
Yeah.
my only thing. So.
All right. Well, thank you again so much. We do just have a couple last slides to go through. Stacy, I can go do the slides for you if you want to talk through the next two.
Yes, please. All right, so this is the point in the presentation where we give you, just like at Mutual Omaha, we give you the sponsored by Green Check Verified. So if any of you are working on building programs and you feel like it is a task that you don't want to take on by yourself and you want some professional guidance, we're here to help you with that. We walk you through building out that program in those 4 critical areas that we talked through our advisory services. And then if you do decide to go forward with a program, then we do have the software that will help you stay in compliance. And that software sits between you and the cannabis business to pull in all that data that you're going to need for validating the sales and your ongoing monitoring and SAR reporting and so on and so forth. So if you need us to help, we're here. Otherwise, just keep in touch with us. We're always providing webinars and great resources on our website.
Okay, and the last thing I'll throw out there is mentioned earlier that we do offer, in partnership with Bankers Web, the accredited cannabis banking professional credential. It is available on demand at any point. You can do it at your own pace. We will actually be doing it live again, just figured out the dates in January. So if you're interested in doing it live, so you can ask questions as we go along, there will be dates that are in January. We do have a very significant discount code. If you are interested, reach out to us and be glad to hook you up with that. And there is a link here that you can go to learn a little bit more about it. Thank you so much, everybody, for sticking around. Really appreciate it. Please stay in touch with us. Jeff, I hope you don't mind. I put a link to your LinkedIn on this page in case people were interested in following up with you, learning more about real estate. Again, I hope you don't mind. But Jeff is there, Meaka is there, Stacy and I, we're always on LinkedIn. We're always commenting about what's going on in cannabis banking specifically. Follow Green Check. Green Check is a company. We post a lot about cannabis banking. So we're here for you. Don't hesitate to reach out. We'd love to chat. So with that, I thank everybody again. Jeff, I appreciate so much your time. Meaka, thanks for joining us. Stacy, thank you for joining us. And we hope to see you again on the next Green Check webinar. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you.